everything happens. Thank you. So, Peter, did I miss something? Can you add something?
That was amazing. It's almost embarrassing how long it went. It's probably going to go longer than my introduction. So I'm going to say thank you for the wonderful introduction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to share my screen and try to answer a few basic questions about the Agile Contract Manifesto. Okay, and so with any luck, you should be able to see my screen. And are there any black balconies on the screen? Is everything good and visible? Any issues? Olivera?
Okay. Sorry?
Is the screen share okay, or is there anything covering, covering my window? It's good.
Yeah,
okay,
I
wonderful.
think we see it, yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so, Olivera mentioned previously, the Agile Manifesto was signed or was published just over 20 years ago. And, let's think back to what was happening 20 years ago. The internet was exploding, things were, well, exploding in more ways than one. It was becoming extremely popular and growing rapidly. But the software profession was really struggling. This is just about the time that the internet bubble was popping. And one of the reasons it was popping is because collectively we weren't very good at delivering software-based solutions. So what happened? Well, there was a strong need to find a better way, and a lot of people were working to that better way. 17 of them got together in a ski resort in Utah, and they published a document which became known simply as the Agile Manifesto. So 4 values, 12 principles that really outlined what all the, the modern approaches to software development, what they had in common. And it was actually quite a radical departure from the way most companies were managed. So on the one hand, it was very challenging, but on the other hand, the stuff that they developed worked. And this simple document, it completely redefined how to do product development and spurred companies on to transform themselves to become more agile, to become more responsive at all levels. Okay. Now, contracts have been around for much longer than 20 years. Okay. Contracts are the glue that hold together the world's economies. People, companies, governments, organizations, they make binding commitments to each other thanks to contracts. Okay, and our world today makes extensive use of offshoring, outsourcing, subcontracting, and all sorts of interesting forms of collaboration to optimize their supply chain. So where are we today? Well, why do we need a new manifesto? Well, between the pandemic of the last 2 years, which wasn't on anybody's radar screen before it happened, and the conflicts of this year, which also wasn't on anybody's radar screen, we're kind of recognizing that the world is moving faster and faster, and we need to be more responsive. And our companies need to be more responsive. And our collaborations, even the collaborations that go across company borders, need to be more responsive. So basically, even the large organizations have recognized this need, okay? And, this need, was recognized by people coming from these organizations and saying, we need a better way to do contracts. We need a better way to collaborate. Now, to create a statement that can be widely supported, we needed to have a group of people that represented all sides of the transaction. So we had people from the vendor side, people from the procurement side, we had some experts. We came together. It took us about a year from the time that the initiators started pulling together the group of people. We had our storming, forming, norming, to where we started creating drafts and eventually came up with something that we felt we could publish. So this has been quite a challenge. Not all of the conversations were easy. And I think everybody in this group has done a really amazing job. So, we've got this little, if you go to the reactions, you'll see there's a possibility to do applause, or you can turn on your video and wave your hands. This is the sign for applause. I'd like to ask you to give the all of our co-creators a round of applause for a great round of work. And I can see a couple of you doing that. I can't actually see most of the people, but I will assume that this is happening. So thank you very much. And also really thank you to this entire group. It was a year is a long time, to come together and create something and do something amazing. but I'm really proud to have been part of this group. And I'm very proud of what we created together. And there's no way any one of us could have done this alone. So why a manifesto? Well, we've heard from a number of sources that it's actually very challenging right now. We got contracts, which traditionally, we make an agreement and we set that agreement in stone so that it doesn't change, and that gives us continuity. But at the same time, we need to be responsive. So we came up with, we were kind of inspired by the original Agile Manifesto. You'll see a lot of similarity in structure and form. 4 values, 10 principles. We didn't really set up to follow that. It could have been 3, it could have been 5, it could have been 10, it could have been 12. It just worked out that way, and it seemed like a natural way to express both where we were coming from and where we felt that we needed to go. One of the things that we really wanted to emphasize was being pragmatic. Okay, we wanted to avoid preaching. We wanted, this isn't about true believers. This is about, practitioners sharing what's worked for us. Okay, with the hope that if you apply it for you, it's going to work for you. So I'd like to invite you to come, take a look. If you haven't already done so, take a look at agilecontractmanifesto.org, read through the values and principles, and then start thinking about how they are going to apply in your situations. Which of them are going to be helpful? Which of them are going to be hard to do? The ones that are going to be hard to do, how come they're going to be helpful anyway? These prove to be really powerful questions. Okay, and with that, Olivera, I'd like to pass the talking stick back to you, and I'm really looking forward to some great conversations.
I guess, Olivera, you're on mute.
Gosh, it is a highlight, right, of my day. I kept being on mute when I was not supposed to be, right? Okay, so I'm going to repeat. Well, thank you, Peter, pretty much. I think it was a really nice and brief explanation on the values and principles that Agile Contract Manifesto brings. Also, I'm going to just talk to a few more creators about, why they came with exactly particular principle and what is the favorite one, because as we know, we had a quite an intensive discussion. So maybe Vivek, you can start with you, and maybe you can explain to us which one is the one that you would particularly pick, and why is that? What is what you see in the market out there with the people you work closely, the organizations you support, and tell us why you believe this matters. And you're on mute.
See, this is the same problem, huh? Great mind thinks alike. And I, as an enterprise agile coach and working for a big consulting firm, was involved with multiple customers in the discussion of creating their contract framework. Most of our customers were working in agile or going agile, and everyone recognized that while we are working in agile, the contract, the way we are doing, the way we are writing is very, very traditional. And everyone recognized that we need to create our own framework, contract framework. While we were doing this, not in just our case, but I experienced in most of cases, often we end up creating an extension of what we already have. So a new version of the old contract, because unlike other agile frameworks, like when we say Scrum or any other agile framework, very confident we can say that Scrum is an agile framework because practices, roles, ceremonies, everything of a Scrum is very well aligned with Agile Manifesto. So there is a manifesto that can help one to define or create an agile framework. When we were creating agile contract framework for customers, we very clearly realized that what is missing is not the great ideas as how to write a good contract or agile contract, but really a way that can trigger that kind of thinking with set of values and principle, and hence this this manifesto. My favorite one out of all values and principle is the last principle. A good contract is the one that anyone can understand. And it's very difficult for legal people. I know there are many legal people here, but this is the one challenge, probably a collective challenge from the whole Agile world to all of us. Thanks, Olivera.
It looks like it is not my day at all today because I got disconnected. So I believe this was a good explanation, Vivek.
Yes, thank you.
I just missed to hear which one is the favorite one.
Last one, the 10th principle.
Hello.
Right. Okay. Hey, Diego. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Good. It's really good that you managed to join us. We started explaining the Agile Contract Manifesto, and we actually started talking about, which particular principle or the value is the favorite one. And I think Peter also needs to explain to us which one is his favorite. And I remember we had a tough discussions there. And
well, I don't know. I was looking for the unmute button, and I actually managed to find it before I started talking, which is, I guess, progress. But it did take me a moment to find it. It's interesting. I looked through all of them, and one of the things that I was really really pleased with is I actually can stand behind all of them, and that each one of us in the group can stand behind all of them. I'm going to talk about principle number 1. Our highest priority is to create a positive outcome for the ultimate customers and for all the contracting parties. So if we go back to the original Agile Manifesto, we haven't called anything into question about what they said. Okay, we're kind of building on that. But the one challenge we had with the original Agile Manifesto, it said our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. Okay, now when you're in a contracting relationship, you actually have a client, not a customer. Okay, you've got usually, okay, obviously, every situation is potentially a bit different, but there's a client, and then there's the vendor. Okay, and the vendor is working for the client, but they usually call the client the customer. And so our highest priority is to satisfy the customer, the one customer, the sun in the sky. Okay, and that creates some distortions, which I don't think the original authors intended. Okay, because we get focused on satisfying, our immediate customer, as opposed to the ultimate customer or the end user. So what we tried to do with principle 1 is remind everybody to see the whole context and to see the big picture. Yes, we're working, as a vendor, we're working for a client, but what we're really trying to do is create value for the ultimate user or the ultimate beneficiary of whatever we're doing. And even if we're the vendor, we're still a fully valued part of this arrangement. And we get to think about what's a good outcome for us too. So I'm going to vote for principle number 1, our highest priority, what really matters.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So the last person I'm going to ask the same question is Carlston. If you can be really brief and tell us which one is the one that you would pick as the most important or most relevant or most applicable to your line of work.
Yes, sure. I think I managed to hit the unmute button now, so you should all hear me, right?
Yeah, we do.
Good. Yeah, so I am actually one of the people in the creators who came more from the contract side than from the agile side. So I am used to writing contracts more than necessarily working agile. And I must say that I think that when we see how the world evolve and how much we are really dependent of each other, I see that when I started to write contracts some 10-15 years back, it was a lot about putting responsibility on the vendors, putting up penalties if something goes wrong. And that's not how we can draft agreements in an agile world. It is not about penalties. It is about collaborating together. So for me, the most interesting one is value number 3, is adaptive partnership more than static relationships. We have to be able to build partnerships, and we have to be able to adapt them because the world adapts the whole time. So I think that will be number 1 for me.
Good, thank you so much. Meanwhile, we have the honor that fantastic lineup of panelists arrived. So let me wish you a really warm welcome, and let's buckle up and prepare for the very nice and heated discussions, I hope. I will try to introduce the best I can. The panelists will start with Diego Lo Giudice, and please, my apologies if I don't pronounce your name well. My destiny is that I move from one geographical area to another, and then, of course, you'll learn a different pronunciation for the same letters. Well, anyway, Diego is bringing 27 years of IT experience, and as a VP Principal Analyst has spent 16 years in Forrester, where he has been researching Agile and other related software engineering teams like DevOps and continuous testing. He also serves clients both on the vendor and system integration side, as well as on the end user side. Recently, he published a book called 2022 Global State of Agile. Becoming proficient is like undertaking a long journey to Mars. Did I miss something? Can you, would you like to add something to that?
No, I would just thank you, first of all, for inviting me, having me here, and for the introduction. No worries about my name. It wasn't a book, it's a report. As you in Forrester, we write tons of reports. I've written hundreds of them, but it's not a book. It's a report that was just published. I do that every 2 years. And so I'll just want to highlight that. Not a problem.
Good. Thank you for being with us today. My next panelist is Scott Ambler. He's a co-creator along with Mark Lyons of PMI's Disciplined Agile Toolkit. He's certainly a thought leader behind the Agile modeling and Agile data methods. Scott is also author of over 20 books, and I have no time to mention all of them now, but Scott can certainly let us know which one is his favorite one. In addition to this, Scott intensively helps teams and organizations to improve their way of working. Anything to add, Scott? And what is your favorite book?
Oh, nobody's ever asked me that. I would have to say The Object Primer. That was my first book, and I'll stick with that.
Good. Anything to add to their introduction?
No, I'm happy to be here though, and I'm looking forward to sharing some experiences.
Good. We are very happy to have you here today. And the third panelist today is Arie Van Bennekum. Again, please apologize if I mispronounce your name. I know I'm terrible with names. I'm terrible with numbers as well. I'm terrible with many things. But at least I try to learn. Well, Arie is pragmatic who embedded his pragmatism in structure, discipline, and common sense for his early days in the healthcare and the military forces up to where he is today. This eventually led to being one of the authors of the Agile Manifesto. Over the years, Arie has become an expert on Agile transformation and business agility, and is working as a thought leader for Wemanity and Institute for Agility and Innovation. Next to this work in Agile and Agile transformation, Arie lectured at the Rotterdam University for 20 years already, the Amsterdam University for 7 years, and in Utrecht for 3 years. And of course, it is about topic about the Agile, project management, business value, and Agile transformation. Arie developed the Agile transformation framework. His first book is about how to handle change and objectives as an individual. And his second book on delivering business agility is coming out soon. Anything to add to this, Arie?
No, I think that's pretty much, yeah. I have 2 sons, a wonderful life, yeah.
Good. I think it's also worth mentioning I'm a mother of a teenage girl, and that's the agility in practice. It's never how you planned in advance. Even a single trip to the restaurant has a lot of changes. Very well indeed. So I'm just gonna, start with questioning with Diego. You just published the State of Agile 2022, as we briefly mentioned. How is the market doing, and what data do you have about Agile contracting that you can share with us?
Sure. So I've been doing this now for over, I think I started the first State of the Agile market in 2011 or 2009. And so I've been doing it every 2 years, and every 2 years I think, well, I think I'm done. Everybody knows what Agile is. There's no real further need for helping clients to adopt Agile, become more Agile. And guess what? Here I am still writing about it. And interestingly enough, last year, one of the top inquiries, my team, the application development and delivery team, which I'm part of, a global team, the number one inquiry from end users, not from vendors, but from end users, was about Agile. And it's all the typical inquiries I get are around scaling Agile, about how to succeed with it. And so the good thing is there's good and bad, right? The good is clients are still willing and wanting to become more Agile. They're not abandoning the journey. But it is a hard journey, as I explain, as I found in, I keep finding through the survey that I run, but also the daily inquiries I have with clients. That's why I compare it to a journey to Mars. It's very hard, it's far. And the challenges keep people, trapped in the stratosphere. They can't just take off. There's only about 25% that really become more proficient in Agile, but the rest are kind of, struggling. And the struggles are all over the place. There's about 10 of them that I talked about that go, from the wrong cultural issues. That's the biggest, by the way, one of the biggest ones. It's always on the top 3 issues that clients complain about, or agree that they have a problem with. There is also among those top 3 in the past few years, I've seen things like product owners from the business, having the business involved, in an engaged way into the projects. There's and it's about commitment from the business, but also the skills, because business is used to these big releases, and they can't think normally in terms of smaller chunks of stuff that can be delivered and deployed, and so they struggle with that. And then I'm just going to touch on another one, because I could go on for hours on this, but it's really one that I like to talk a lot about, is the Agile executive leadership issues. Budgeting, things like, turning budgeting into becoming more of a flexible process, and actually having a planning process around it, and not just folks that are shouting around the table who gets more money. Normally that's what happens. And so there's a whole bunch of challenges that we see. And of course, this discussion around the Agile contracting is another, I didn't list it explicitly as one of the challenges, but it is a challenge. And if you look at the data, there's only 16% that claim that they have Agile contract terms and vendor governance. And, I'd be interested to see exactly what that is. Probably that's what we're going to discuss today. But most of them are still operating with a traditional waterfall contract, which I learned years ago when there was this conversation going on in the UK. There was this small team. I was working with lawyers and even the UK government, and I found out that a waterfall contract basically was something that came from the building industry, building houses. So, quite different from building software. And so, I guess those are some of the highlights, but I can share more, as we go through the conversation today.
Good. Thank you very much for that. I think it's also a good introduction. And I'm going to swiftly move to Scott. So the Agile contracting, or creation of the Agile contract, is a response for changing needs during the execution, during delivery. why don't traditional contracts and change management do the trick?
Was that for me?
Yes, for Scott, yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I missed that. Yeah, so I think you need to have something that's fit for purpose. So if you're going to work in an agile manner, then you should have a contract that reflects working in an agile manner. If you want to, so if I want to contract somebody to work in a traditional serial manner, then my contract terms should reflect that. Same thing for agile, same thing for lean. It's all about being fit for purpose. So if there's a delta there, so if I'm using agile contracting terms and philosophies to acquire agile working, an agile working team or service provider or whatever you want to call that, then yeah, it's not going to work out well. And so I don't want to blame it on traditional versus agile. It's really just it's got to be fit for purpose. And I think that's where a lot of contracts go wrong. There's not there needs to be an understanding that the contract needs to reflect the way of working on the back end, and of course all the governance around that and all that good stuff. So it's really the delta is the problem.
So are you saying that there is decision point when needs to be decision to be made whether to apply agile or traditional contract to a particular relationship?
Yeah, I think part of the initial discussion needs to be, what's the most appropriate way of working for solving this problem? And there's an implication there that if you get that wrong, that you will need to partway into the engagement, you'll need to rethink the contract, or live with whatever, you're going to, either you've got to decide, we're going to live with whatever we've contracted for, or we're going to have to update the contract and therefore maybe rethink the overall, the overall engagement. So yeah, you really fairly early on, you need to go in with an understanding of what we're actually doing. So, and this I think is a challenge for contracting people. One size does not fit all. This is something we talk about in DA a lot. We give options, and there's many ways you can approach contracting. And you need to have a reasonably good understanding of, use the right strategy, use the appropriate strategy for the situation that you're in.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think this is a big thing we can leave with this session today. I'm certainly going to move to Arie, and in terms of collaboration within the contractually bound relationships, do you have any examples that you can say were very agile and that this really worked?
Yeah, I do. Just out of my own practice, right? And I think, and that they were successful. Just commercial deliveries, right? Where you, as a supplier, go in with your client into that collaboration called a project or whatever you call it. And the two things, right? If you go into contracting, the contracting has to reflect the way you work, but also the kind of output that you look for. And especially in the traditional ways of working, you have very often contracts based on a list of requirements, whatever the requirements are. And one of the things that I did with a lot of pleasure and a lot of success is that you, together with the client, you talk about, okay, what is the value that you want to have? So you're making something and it's supposed to generate value, right? The value is not there when you deliver, but the value starts to build the moment you start using it. So going in with a contract that is reflecting the way you work, including the collaboration, and also the importance of sticking to that collaboration, then doing the delivery, and then after the delivery in the next, and you can choose, 6 months or 2 years, whatever, you measure the success and you share the success together. And the point is that, of course, the initial delivery is for a lower price, but then when you start, doing well, both of you, if the value comes, because I will only get a better pay, which is important for the teams that I work with, when we have done a successful, but then when we get the pay, the client will have the pay as well, because the value is obviously achieved, right? And those are the ones that I like. I like them the most. I started doing those in the 1998, 1999, and of course, over time, you start improving those kind of things. The problem is always you bump into people in organizations, PMOs, or in the procurement department that are so far away from this way of thinking, how you do a contract, how you measure progress, how you demonstrate progress, and how you say, okay, now we are successful in our delivery. And for me, trying to explain that my happiness is not only there when I done the delivery on time and in a budget or whatever, but that you can say after 6 months or 12 months, see, there's the value, now it's coming out. And that's the way of thinking that you bump into with a lot of people. That's very, very hard to grasp for them. So that going through that process, two things happen. It takes a lot of time, and some organizations do it, but very often, you know, they choose the safe route and they choose a delivery organization that's doing completely waterfall because that's what they know. That's what their processes and documents and templates are made for, right? So that's a struggle that you always have.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really fair explanation, a very good one. And it also is a really a good point that leads me to the next question that I'm gonna direct to Diego again. So now we have the manifesto is born, the Agile Contract Manifesto is born, is out there in the space available for everyone. But the biggest challenge is how to bridge the gap between intention and the application. So what advice would you give to the organization to put it in practice?
So this is a very interesting question, because I see and I still see the same problem even with the original Agile Manifesto. I think when an organization decides to transform and become really, you know, working in a different way with agile, with an agile culture and mindset, some of the organizations do the right thing, which is they grab the manifesto and the principles and they look at it and say, you know, are these beliefs what I want to, you know, how do these beliefs apply to my organization? And if they don't, do I want to change? And am I going to do everything to make that change? And so I think a very good starting point for people to start using the Agile Contracting Manifesto is to kind of follow that same path, the same path that unfortunately not everybody follows. And, you know, I tell my clients, I just send them back. It's like, you know, at school, when somebody doesn't give you the right answer, go back to the board. Let's go over the lesson again. I think it's really important for executives and the organization to understand what the manifesto really means. The organization has to understand that, and because they're all principles and their values, and they have to apply them, put them in their strategic planning, and point people to them when they're doing, you know, introducing changes, behavioral changes and actions, and say, look, we you know, this is the reason why we're doing whatever we're doing, and you have to, you know, execute. Here's the reason, right? Here's the values and the principles. It doesn't have to be necessary. I don't think people are going to exactly take the manifesto as it is and, right, you know, stick it on the wall and say, this is what I'm going to follow. I think they're going to kind of look at it and see how they can interpret their own way of it, respecting, you know, what it really brings and putting it in their own terms. That's what I see successful organizations do. And so I think they should do the same thing.
Right. And do you also see some consequences if organizations fail to apply the principles?
Well, I think the consequences are that they're going to, I mean, yes, the consequences are you won't be able to really, you're going to have that disconnect, in my opinion, as Scott was saying. If you don't look at the values and the principles and apply them in a contract and write the contract with them in mind, it's going to be very hard to have a good relationship between the vendor and the client. And it's going to be hard to kind of, you know, apply these new ways of working. And therefore, the consequences, in my opinion, are today, why are people adopting Agile? Right? They're adopting Agile because they need more business agility, because they need to accelerate digital. The COVID and you know, the pandemic showed to everybody that we need to change and we need to be ready to change, and change can be unexpected. And those that really succeeded faster or better with it were the ones that were ready to change. And as you go through the exercise of adopting Agile, I think that's the mindset that people acquire, right? They get much more, they are much more flexible in change and pivoting. And so I think, and so basically, this really has to be seen both on the client side and on the vendor side. I don't blame either one of the two sides, you know, vendors and clients. This is a change that they both have to go through, right? Clients can't think that they can outsource Agile to a vendor and they stay the way they are, and on the other way around, right? If you're a vendor and you're trying to be Agile with someone that doesn't want to be Agile, then you're going to have a lot of problems. And so I think those are the consequences. You won't succeed.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, very nicely goes with the question I would like to ask next. But before I do that, I would like to invite audience, if there are any questions for the panelists or any of the co-creators of the Agile Contract Manifesto, please just type them simply in the chat. And if time allows, we're gonna address them and hopefully answer to your satisfaction. But I'm gonna looking now into Scott to ask the question. When you are a service provider and an Agile contract is clearly needed, but the client is reluctant to go there, what would be your strategy to convince them?
Yeah, so first answer is it depends on the situation, of course, but I would certainly have a conversation with the customer and say and explain why, you know, here's why I think we need to take a more agile approach. And it's probably an agile approach in the writing of the contract itself. So it really, you know, if you look at, I believe it's Principle 2 behind the manifesto, it's really all about doing this throughout the entire process and not just during the execution of the contract. So I think we need to have a more collaborative, I'll talk with the customer about, we need to have a more collaborative discussion about what you're actually asking for and how you want to work. And so very often the people doing the contracting don't really understand the nature of the problem that they're trying to solve, right? So they're coming to me, me and others to, help me with this problem. And the reason why they're having this problem is they really don't understand it to begin with. So then as a result, their contracting approach is almost always guaranteed to be a mess because they just don't have the capability to understand the problem. So you got to help them understand the problem and back away from whatever preconceptions they might have about here's how we need to manage this effort. So I think there's that, so the way you manage you would contract to have a building built would be very different than the way you would contract if software built, perhaps. So they really do need help understanding that. Then I would have this conversation with them, try to get them on a better path. But at the same time, I would also be as the service provider or potential service provider, I would also be, the question in my mind is, do I really want to work with this customer? Because my philosophy is bad business is bad business. So if they can't set up a situation where I can be successful working with them, I'm going to walk away from it. And more than likely being, reasonably evil, I will also point to whatever other service providers that I really don't like. And I'll say, you know what, you really need to work with those guys because they'd probably be happy to pick this contract up because I'm happy to hand off bad business to people I don't like. So, but that's just me. So, but yeah, I would help do my best to get them on a better path. But if they choose to, great. I'm happy to be on that journey. If they choose to go on some strange journey, great. They can do it without me.
Good. Thank you for that. I mean, it's very clear and a little bit sharp, I must add. My next question is for Arie. And I must say that I really love this question because it's about the simplification. Simplification has been a big deal in contracting for a very long time, even before we started talking Agile. However, with the Agile and self-organizing team, this becomes more prominent than ever. What do you see as a blocking factor?
I think the most blocking factor is the us and them approach. You try to protect yourself, and I can understand that one. And then we bump into a problem, and then we think, oh, we had a contract and now we still have the problem. So in the next contract, we have some extra criteria, and we start to make it more complicated instead of solving the problem that was there. I think that's the most important one, right? Simplifying doesn't mean that you oversimplify it. It has to be functional in what you do. But the tendency of people is if we have a problem, we try to solve it by creating 2 or 3 more problems. And that's what you need to get away from. And I think as long as you can keep the focus on what kind of value that you want to achieve, and then bringing the right people and the right collaboration where you take a joint effort. And the way I was just talking before, the way the contract that I made at the time means that if you commit to your client to say, if we are going to do this development together, you are going to generate value with that solution. We have so much trust in what we do that we connect our benefits to your value that you achieve. That kind of a commitment can create a platform for getting out of the us and them and making it really a shared responsibility working. I think that's more healthy, because the moment that you keep that us and them thing, it's about, sweeping your own floor clean and making sure that you, if anything happens, that you can put it on the other one, and that will never be beneficial.
Right. It's a very good view, and thank you for that. And I really like you mentioned us and them, because I think that's a big suffer, at least in my work life. Moving further, the question for Diego about the agile contractors is a specific challenge for procurement, and this is what we see, that the procurement is not really opening up their arms and saying, "Olé, we are now going to change the way we do business, and we are now going to jump into creating agile contracts." How can they make their judgment on value for money? What do you think? How can they address risk while not hindering agility? What would be your view on general change that procurement needs to go through to enable the creation of the agile contracts?
Well, I think there's a few things, very interesting things that both Scott said and Arie said that I'm going to connect to. So, the first thing is procurement has to understand what we're talking about, right? What agile is, because there's a lot of misunderstanding even outside of procurement. I'm so surprised at the tech exec level. I tell maybe us on the ground getting the work done know what agile really means and the change it requires, but I see a lot of executive leaders, it's very superficial, the understanding they have, and procurement is the same. So first thing is, let's make sure procurement understands, and maybe, it's our fault and because it's been a software industry thing, but I think procurement needs to really, understand. And this is, I think, what the Agile Contracting Manifesto is going to help them do, I guess. That's number one. But how can they make judge for value for money? I think here I'm going to tie to what Arie said, which is, in my opinion, they need to, they have to put the right metrics in place. Metrics and business value. I mean, on the software development world, I just published a research I finished end of last year, more or less, that what are the modern application development metrics that matter? Of course, that means for Agile and DevOps type of context. And guess what? Business value is the #1 outcome metric that these teams are trying to focus on more. So we have to let go efficiency a bit more in favor of generating business value. Now, measuring business value is not easy, but and also I think there's this kind of other confusion around outcome-driven contracts, which is which is like revenue sharing. That's a different thing. I think what Arie said is perfectly right. It's if we focus more on business value. So I'm going to tell procurement, look, we're going to measure value, and as a vendor, I totally agree with Arie. As a vendor, you as a you client and me vendor, we're going to both agree what value, what business value this product, this feature, this service is going to deliver, and we're going to be measured on it. And it's going to be part of the great dashboard of 5 important cluster of metrics, of which business value is at the center. And then of course you're going to have other metrics that are more leading into the business value, like quality metrics. And you're still going to have efficiency, right? It's not going away, but I'm just saying the focus should be around business value. Recently we've seen engagement become more important, employee experience, and all the other metrics for measuring how well we're doing in terms of progressing our activities, activity type of metrics, but business value at the center. And I think that's how we kind of get procurement more encouraged in going down this path of writing an agile contract. Risk, there's a lot of it around trust as well. So I think when you look at risk, so how do you address risk? I think you have to put some contingency plans in place. I don't think I have an exhaustive answer for this, but I can give you an example of one thing that I saw in a contract and in a relationship that went really well, that a client told me, a large telecom company in Britain told me about a couple of years ago, was they had an agile company they were working agile, and what they did is they put in place this contract, which was basically had on one side some clauses that meant a lot of flexibility. If the team is not working well, you're going to change the resources on request in 2 weeks, very short time, right? Which seems very punishing for the vendor, but it wasn't, because they gave them other conditions that kind of mitigated that. And one thing that I really liked was that the client was open to put in place a SWAT team that would be thrown at teams that were moving agile and that had some problems, because at the end of the day, it has to be a win-win, right? There's no, if a project gets stopped or halted or does not succeed, it's going to be bad for the vendor, bad for the client, right? And this is kind of the them and us thing that Arie was talking about. And so there are ways to mitigate some of the risk, and that's just one of the examples, I'd say, that I have at least.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to ask two more questions till 6 o'clock, and then we will look into questions for the audience. So I'm looking into Scott now, and I'm just gonna put it out there. The agile contracts in public sector, insurance, energy. How do you see that?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Do it. Yeah. So you can frankly put any industry in that list that you want to, and the answer would still be yes. The business domain that you're in, the industry that you're in, has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on the decision of how agile can I be in pretty much anything that I want to do. So it really, there's nothing. I don't know of a single industry that I could point to where that I would say, oh, you're so special that you can't possibly do this. I don't know of any. So let's not even use that as, don't go there. Let's not even use that as an excuse, because it's just an excuse and it won't hold any water. So the answer is yes, you can do it. But it requires a mindset change. It requires a conscious decision to succeed.
Good. Okay, well, thank you for that. It was a little bit unexpected based on my experience, but now I'm really far more optimistic than I used to be. So thank you for that. And Arie, the negotiation on agile contracts, what are the key topics to be discussed? What are the key topics that needs to be agreed on?
If I would limit it to two, because there are more, but if there are two, one, you need to know the value that you're focusing on. The client needs to understand, because what very often happens is they come to you and they ask for a solution. This is what I want. And then you have this requirements list that you have to follow up to. And you have to take it one step back. Why is it that you want, what is that you want to achieve? If you have that value clear, then not only you can focus much more on what internal the solution should have to bring that value, but also you can then empower the teams if they need to make changes, in the development process, to make sure that if they have new insights, that they get, better and better to delivering that value. If I go into such a contract, for me, it's very important that I have in the contract written down how we work. And I always say that the success in Agile comes with the quality and the discipline that you apply, doing the Agile practices and rituals. And having the people there, having the right people there, having people there empowered and very disciplined, be there all the time is very important. So I build up, but you cannot just throw that into a PMO or something. You have to have really that open discussion with the client, why you do it like this, because if you do it like this, you can deliver with a massive benefit to your client, but it takes two to tango, right? And that's what they need to understand. So if you want to bring it down to my top two, it's one side, understand the business value that the client is after. And secondly, agree clearly on who are you going to work with and in what way. And the conversation about, okay, and I'm going to pull somebody out of the team because the client doesn't like me. No, I'm going to do this work with this team because those are my people and they know how to do this. I trust them to do this. And if you don't like somebody, bad luck, right? Because if you have that kind of thing and you disrupt the team spirit by changing the team all the time because somebody has a bad hair day, that doesn't work, right? So I'm very strict on this, right? And those are for me the top twos that I use running around the building of the client, because I know they are the essence of bringing the success.
Good, thank you for that. We also have a very interesting questions coming from the audience, and I'm going to move to them. The first one coming from Siri says the huge part of contract is a service level agreements. How do we make sure those align with the manifesto? Anyone, whoever wants to answer the question is welcome.
I'm going to give a pretty bold answer and very short. No SLAs. You don't need SLAs. You need metrics, but not benchmarks, because every client is different from another. And looking at establishing SLAs with predefined benchmarks, you have to do 100 story points a day or whatever, other types of benchmarks are, don't work. Or at least it goes back to defining something rigidly. That's my take.
Thank you so much. It was really very concise. So moving to the Nancy's questions, I'm trying to, read as many as possible because time is also just running. So the Nancy says, ideally we could fully specify the desired outcomes, and that would allow each party to work in any way they choose. But product services are too complex to be fully specified, and competition can take a long time. Completion can take a long time. So it's necessary for contracts to talk about what will be acceptable indicators or of incremental progress. Agile methods get you incremental value where traditional methods are still all on paper. This question of what will show acceptable progress is really important, and it's why contracts have to get into discussion of the process that will be used for development. I think this is more, it's not really the question is, or there is, if there is a need to elaborate a bit more, it's rather a statement as I see.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. Yeah, I agree with that. It's, when you're writing up these contracts, you've really got to, and this, aligns with what Arie was earlier saying, you've really got to describe what the process is. How is our way of working on both the client and the service provider side, right? Here's how we agree to work together to accomplish whatever it is we want to accomplish. And it also gets back to my earlier point of, it really does depend. If I'm contracting for something that is vague and fuzzy, which is pretty much the definition of software, then I have to have a contract that reflects the vagueness and the fuzziness of the requirements and the situation and the fact that things are going to change and we're going to have to react to those changes. So going in with a fixed mindset into something that requires a very, very flexible mindset is not the way to go. So there's got to be a fit for purpose. There's got to be an alignment between the contract terms and the actual behavior that's required. And if you don't have that, you're cooked.
Yeah, correct. The next one comes from Jan, and it is about the Agile, scaled Agile. So it says, how applicable do you see the use of Agile contracting when helping clients transformation to adopt scale Agile way of working versus actually building software solution with or for them? And what prerequisites do you think have to be in place to even start the Agile contracting conversation? Anyone wants to give their view on that?
I can come in if you like.
Yes, please.
I think if you're looking for prerequisites in place to start the conversation about agile contracting or agile in general, any moment is a good moment. I mean, don't find an excuse to wait because the prerequisites are not in place. Now, if you think, Scott just say, sometimes you have clients where you say, no, I'm not going in there, right? And I think that's the more basic choice that you have. I mean, this is how I work. I'm very convinced in doing this, right? And I'm not doing old school waterfall projects. So I'm sitting down with my clients and this is how I can do it. These are, on your side, the obligations that you have in terms of money or presence or collaboration, that kind of thing. And if it's a no, it's a no. I mean, that's the point, but there is no reason not to have that conversation, in my opinion.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think, what I'm finding is, and I'm going through this research right now. I surveyed about 50 on the vendor side, but with the clients I talk every day. And so the research I'm doing is I want to know, if you're willing to deliver modern applications, that means software, of course, right? Based on modern architectures, new technologies, etc. But at the same time, if you're willing to help the client also transform and not just, so this is not just about, you're going to build something in Agile, here it is, right? I don't see a lot of value there. The value that I see that can be in this partnership is when both things are obtained. Change, that means the client is also transforming. By the way, the numbers show that clients want to become a little bit more self-sufficient. They don't want to just like hand over stuff to others and get the package back, right? That's kind of, in some areas it works, but we're not, the direction is a little bit different. And so I think it's not a prerequisite, but it would be one of the litmus tests I would do if I was the provider, which is if the client has no intention understanding that this requires change, and we're not, and I'm here to help you both change and help you deliver at the same time, then I think, that's a valuable conversation. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a very hard one. And probably I would walk away. But I must say that lots of, so on the client side, there has to be, trust into ready to kind of work on both sides, change and getting something delivered. But it has to happen also on the vendor side, which I'm seeing in this research that lots of vendors claim they want to do it, they do it, but then you end up looking at the answers and you only see delivering stuff and forgetting about the transformational aspects, which we can't. I would expect more. I would like to see more commitment to that aspect.
Can I add something to this?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that I know, if you look back when I started doing this in the mid-90s, what I was focusing on before going into my delivery sprints was, okay, I need to set up the collaboration because I want to have a complete alignment and agreement on this is how we work in order to make this successful, right? Otherwise, there will be financially somebody with a lot of pain, which is not the intention. In hindsight, I said, okay, those are sort of mini temporary transformations because you bring together a team, together with the client, the highest level budget owners and everything. This is how we're going to work. But then after, it would be, let's say, disassembled the team and people would go and fly in all kinds of directions and doing other stuff. If you want to use those kind of collaborations as part of a transformation, it needs to be really part of your approach in transformation because you want to take that effort of that temporary mini transformation that you made to do this one delivery to make that sustainable and so you can benefit from it in the future. And that means that you have to spend time on it, both sides. You have to spend time on it to make that happen, and it has to be part of the transformation approach.
Very good, but we certainly talk about transformation here. I'm going to move to the next question coming from Thomas. I really like the question. It says that client executives are often asking for a cost estimate to approve the start of an Agile project and many times want the supplier to enter a fixed price contract. In Agile, when not having the requirements specified, cost estimation is very difficult. The question is, What is the price model to be used when working in Agile projects?
I can take a shot at this. First, the answer is it depends. So most people will beat up on the fixed price approach, and that's a fairly good thing. So fixed price is appropriate for very straightforward, well-defined things. So you want me to come in and deliver a workshop? Okay, I can give you a fixed price for that. You want to buy a chunk of time, consulting time from me? Okay, I can give you a fixed price for that. So many hours for so many dollars. Really straightforward. But if you want me to give you a fixed price for a vaguely defined project, that's a sucker's bet, and I'm not going to take sucker's bet, and I will help the client understand that it's a sucker's bet. And I know they desperately want a fixed price because they're unable to actually understand what they're managing, but they really do need help understanding that that's a really bad idea to be asking for. And then I'll start walking them through better ways of thinking. But once again, bad business is bad business. So I would, if it's vaguely defined, then you need to have some sort of we'll have multiple deliverables and we'll make decisions, some stage gate thing, some sort of time materials thing. But fixed price on something that's vague and guaranteed to change, that's just not a good idea. Unless, of course, I'm actually delivering something on a regular basis, and then I'll say, okay, you want to give me a fixed price? Fine. I just can't tell you what I'm going to deliver. I'll deliver the most valuable stuff I can, but I can't tell you exactly what that's going to be because you can't tell me exactly what you want, and you're going to change your mind anyway. So I'm not going to play that game. But yeah, you want to spend $1 million? I'll help you spend $1 million as wisely as possible, as long as you step up and make decisions. But I can't, you can't. It's the old iron triangle thing, right? You just can't set, cost, time, and scope, and hope for anything of value coming out of that.
Good. Well, that's fair enough. Thank you so much. I think we exhausted the questions from the audience. And before we close today's session, maybe just the last message from each of the panelists to the audience, something that they will live with. Let's go around this virtual room. Can we maybe start from Arie?
Yeah. I'm thinking, because we're talking, for example, about PMOs and procurement and stuff, and those are the people that are so focused for many years, for decades, on the processes and the numbers and the fixed facts, right? So we need something different. The most important thing is that we understand it takes change. You don't get change by saying no. You get change by saying yes to and start experimenting together, and that requires a level of trust. And I worked in environments where agile delivery teams would have the POs walking in and out. They would have their workspace even in the environment of the teams, and they knew this team is very reliable in terms of you can predict the number of points that they can deliver per sprint, and the quality of the work is known. But then already you have this nice, close, trustworthy relationship. If you can get to that one, then it's just getting them in, and sprint after sprint, you buy basically building capacity, right? So it can be done. And Scott said already a number of times, it depends, and every situation is different. And I think you need to allow, and even if you are providing your services to clients, for that same client, you might have different situations and different models. And there's quite a few pieces written about this, and there are a lot of stories available about this. I did myself in all sorts of points, but also just in having a team for 2 weeks. This is the price, and the next, and then when the client starts seeing, for the first 2 weeks in the sprint, and they get output, and they say, hey, this is nice, what's coming out, give me another one, and give me another one, and give me another one. And then you get into wisely spending that $1 million that Scott was talking about. But that requires the collaboration, not the us and them, and it requires also time to build that trust. And trust, as we know, comes by foot and goes on a horse. So you need to be very careful on monitoring that trust in the relationship, and you need to stay open, and that requires also an effort from the people, not just in those teams collaborating, but around it, having the wider responsibility.
Okay, I can go next if you want. So basically,
Yes.
So I don't know if the Agile Contract Manifesto is perfect, and or if it needs to change, but I think it is a very good starting point. And my recommendation is and I don't know if on the call we have procurement people or just IT people, developers, etc. I hope we have also procurement people. If not, I think we have to bring procurement, legal, and technology execs sit around a table with your provider, look at the Agile Manifesto, and start writing the contract by looking at the principles that it inspires and the values. I get a lot of inquiries where clients say, do you have a template for a contract for Agile? And I say, no, I don't, and I'm never going to create one. You have to create your own. And by the way, if you're working with a good partner, probably they have some experience in doing that with other clients. And so open up, sit down, collaborate. And I think that's really it, right? I mean, simply start collaboration, start the collaboration, and be very open. A true partnership starts there. And just, then that will help you kind of frame the contract. And maybe there are things around that you can use, but it's really about everyone defining kind of their own journey.
Very good, thank you. Scott, the last message from you.
Yeah, so I've said it before, I'll say it again, it depends. So you really need a fit for purpose strategy. You need to collaborate across the board with everybody, be willing to experiment, be willing to learn, be willing to change up the way that you're working. One size does not fit all. There is no magic silver bullet. There is no one way of doing it. There are no best practices. You need to know what you're doing, and you need to know what your options are, and you need to be willing to learn and experiment and change as you learn and as your situation changes. And if you're not doing that, you're gonna struggle. And I think the manifesto reflects this reality of needing to be flexible, needing to work together, be collaborative, all that good sort of stuff. And but as Diego was saying, that there is no, he's not going to write a template for a contract, because you really need to have a contract that reflects the reality that you face. So you need to know what you're doing is the unfortunate challenge, and you need to be willing to learn and tough it out.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for this wonderful closing words and for the fantastic discussion on the topics that might be a little bit challenging as well and provocative in today's world. Let me thank you for being here with us. Let me thank you all the audience for coming to be here with us, and let me invite you to visit the website and the Agile Contract Manifesto. You can as well sign the manifesto, which basically means you're giving us support. As I say, the group of enthusiasts and agilists came together, people with the experience in delivery, in technology, in procurement, in sourcing, in outsourcing came together, and we know it's not perfect. So we are aiming for continuous improvement and continuous learning, but it's out there. We are very proud, and I really hope, as Diego mentioned, that this is going to become the instrument that procurement, business, technology, vendors, suppliers actually take in front of them and start thinking about them and actually writing the contract to legalize the relationship they have in running business together. So thank you very much, everyone. I don't know if anyone wants to add something before we just depart and close the call.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yes,
Good.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.